This week's blog post is the third in my series on a visit to Tuscany in January 2024. In the upcoming posts, I'll be talking about tourist sites and gorgeous artworks in Florence, Pisa, and the surrounding area. The first couple posts in this series are more in the way of public service announcements. They provide the answers to questions which I wish I had known enough to ask before I traveled to Italy. First post is on planning, packing, and flights. The second is on car rentals and driving in Italy. This week, I'm looking at Italian restaurants and our hotel. So, restaurants. My husband and I walked out of the car rental office at Florence Airport at 8 p.m. on New Year's Eve, and we were starving. We knew nothing of Florence, not even where the central area is in relation to the airport. Via Google Maps, we found a restaurant rated 4 stars that said it was open. Well, once there, we could not find any street parking anywhere nearby. Shortage of street parking is, as it turns out, typical in Florence. Eventually, we decided to just take the first parking spot we saw and then choose a restaurant near it, based on the number of stars on Google Maps. Had we known about city parking garages, which I discussed in last week's post, we would have been sitting down to dinner a lot earlier. As it is, I suspect that the spot we finally took was residents-only parking, but we were lucky enough not to get a ticket. We ate at La Forca near Sant'Ambrogio, and, spoiler, it was a fantastic meal. La Forca is a local place. The staff spoke very little English, and the menu is entirely in Italian. Fortunately, we've eaten in enough Italian restaurants in the U.S. to deal with an Italian menu. The maitre d' almost turned us away at the door because we had no reservation. On New Year's Eve, they were booked solid. Fortunately, Italians tend to eat much later than I do. The maitre d' decided we could stay if we finished in an hour. And that was no problem because we were so tired from flying at that point that only hunger was keeping us awake. And I suspect that we looked that way too. Just a note, if we had been aggressive, the maitre d' would probably have politely but firmly refused to seat us. Being aggressive is not our normal style, and we were far too exhausted to be rude. We tried to communicate hunger and desperation politely in broken Italian, and we were seated. Once we were seated, the restaurant staff was fantastic. They gave us each gratis pink champagne cocktail. We ordered an octopus appetizer on mashed potatoes, Florentine steak, which is a giant T-bone steak, and a pork fillet. All of them were perfectly prepared and delicious. The waitress brought us, again gratis, the yummiest piece of pistachio cheesecake I've ever had or probably ever will have. Prices were very reasonable. A note on getting the check at the restaurant. This was our first experience with getting the check at an Italian restaurant. We tried 3 times to have our waitress, who spoke minimal English, to bring us the check. It turns out that if you want to pay with a credit card in an Italian restaurant, you go to the front desk rather than waiting for a check at the table. The tip was included in the bill. We didn't even have the option of adding it to the credit card. If we had had any small denomination euro bills, we would have left some cash on the table since the food and the service were so good. On to hotels. We stayed at a place called Borgo alle Vigne, a Hilton timeshare in Selvatelle, about 20 miles south of the Autostrada, the highway, runs from Florence to Pisa. It's a really lovely location in the Tuscan hills. Driving to Florence from there took about an hour, driving to Pisa somewhat less. Had we thought about its location, we probably would have flown into the Pisa airport. Florence has only one runway, and apparently if there's a strong crosswind, it just shuts down. I give high marks to the Borgo alle Vigne, the staff, the amenities, furniture, the appliances, the maintenance, and the maid service were all top-notch. The front office has a rack of extraordinarily useful flyers on attractions within driving distance, including the driving times to each of them and recommended restaurants nearby. One minor drawback, which I suspect applies to a lot of Italy, is that the clothes dryer was so energy efficient that it took more than 3 hours to dry a very small load of laundry. We learned to start the laundry as soon as we stepped in the door in the evening. Still, having a washer dryer available meant packing far fewer clothes. So we were happy to have access to one, even if it took a long time to do its job. Diane Durante Writer has hundreds of posts on sculpture, painting, and my other obsessions. To join the Sunday Recommendations email list, visit the URL that's on the screen or email me. And you can say, "Well done, Diane," or support my work and receive rewards by means of the tip jar on dianeduranteWriter.com. As always, thank you for listening.